You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody, welcome back. And I want to introduce you to Colette Delawalla. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay. She's the founder and CEO of Stand Up for Science, which may surprise her as much as it surprised everybody. Colette, your journey from an Emory grad student to a political organizer is the story of our time. So can we just start? Tell us about you and how you started this now huge organization.
Yeah, thank you so much, Evan, for having me on today. And you got it right. It's Delawalla, just exactly like it's spelled. In February of last year, was finishing up my dissertation grant to the NIH. I was finishing up my PhD in clinical psychology. I'm an addiction scientist, so I study alcohol use disorder in the general sample. So no, woke, quote unquote, things supposedly. And just a few days before my grant was due to our university grants office for them to review and then submit it to the NIH, the banned words list was released. And woman, Black, LGBTQ, bias, vulnerable, marijuana, and opioid was also on that list. So, I study addiction in a general sample. And so I had all these words in my paper or in my grant. And the university grants office advised me to take those words out. And I, I mean, just no, I'm not doing that. I didn't crawl my way into science to be told that I can't have the word woman in my grant. And so we pushed the grant off to the next deadline to try to figure out how we were going to sort it. And in the meantime, I was just stewing. And this was, very early February. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, like, there has to be, like, someone has to be protesting. And people have to be getting in the streets. And I couldn't find anything. And so I took a chance. I posted on Blue Sky and I just said, we're having a Stand Up for Science protest in Washington, D.C. on March 7th. And it went viral. I mean, it just exploded. On March 7th, in less than a month, we pulled together over 130 protests across the world. It went international to stand up for science, and it was the first organized, real collective action in the second Trump administration. And after that, I thought that legacy organizations would look at this moment and go, oh, we have to get our stuff together. Like we need to put up some fight here. We're going to lose everything in the sciences. And that's not what was happening. And what I realized was that the scientific ecosystem in the United States didn't have really good political machinery and didn't have what it was going to take to meet this moment. And it was so obvious to me that, the second that a president sits down and signs an executive order that says that redefines, quote unquote, biological sex incorrectly, like, we're in bad territory. And that was hours into his presidency. And so we had no reason to expect things were suddenly going to get better. Um, and so to that end, we built what needed to be built. And now we are a C3, a 501c3 nonprofit, a 501c4 nonprofit, and we're launching a super PAC this month to get involved in the midterms and ultimately to take back power for the people and to make sure that science is not used as a weapon against the public, but to make sure that we have the tools necessary to see science benefiting the public and not being privatized, right?
Okay, so everybody, I wanted you to hear this story because this is the story of how one person in our crazy democracy can identify a need that needs to be met, can look at her own experience and say, I'm not alone. There are literally tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people who share my experience who don't yet know how to use their voice, and give them that voice, right?
Mhm.
And her issue is science, but there are a lot of them out there. In this moment, we need everyone to understand you can do what Colette did, an amazing thing, an absolutely amazing thing, and it continues and it grows. So Colette, you made the point when you were telling your story that that the organized structures of science in America were helpless in this moment. And I
Yeah,
think that's absolutely right because they were not organized to get involved in political fights. They might have been organized to talk priorities with the National Sciences Foundation, right?
sure.
So that the science and the government worked together. But when the government decided they weren't working anymore, they were left helpless and afraid.
Hmm. Hmm.
And what you've done, um, I mean, it's not unique to science. Big law firms, big media companies, big tech
Yep.
companies, many universities have no clue how to fight back, right?
Yep.
So,
That's exactly right.
yeah,
And I think it speaks to the fact that, for 80 years, the scientific ecosystem has been able to be comfortable because this is the first time in, I mean, the history of the United States that science has been a partisan issue. That trying to prevent a disease is now a partisan topic. But what we're finding is that across the public, it's actually not that partisan. People really don't like measles, they don't like polio, they don't like cancer, and they don't like you messing with their cures.
hmm,
I think that we've been really pleasantly surprised at the sheer breadth of support that we have, and how many people are cheering us on, and who support this. So, people kind of painted me to be a little bit crazy that I was exaggerating how bad this was going to get. But I think, unfortunately, my hot takes have aged pretty well. But also, alongside that, the support and the community that we built has also aged very well.
yeah.
And we're fighting and we're winning.
But I want to stick with this point just a little longer about the
Sure.
organizations, and I'm going to
Yeah,
do this
absolutely.
only because of yesterday.
Hmm.
Because even in these
Yes.
organizations, there are people who want to champion, to want the organizations themselves to get them and champion this fight, and they have trouble. So tell us all what happened to the American Diabetes Association yesterday.
Yes. So, the editor in chief of the American Diabetes Association Home Journal co authored this really fantastic editorial about Trump's attacks on biomedical research and how scientists and researchers and folks in medicine need to stand up and speak out now. It was published in the ADA's own journal. It was peer reviewed, and he and a few of his colleagues, including the past president of ADA, were handing out physical copies of this editorial. And my understanding after speaking with, I spoke with Stephen about this, and he let me know that they
Forgive me, Stephen is
Stephen is the editor in chief who
right.
who is the head person in this story.
Yep.
He let me know that the leadership at the ADA, the CEO and board, got wind of this and called in the New Orleans Police Department ahead of time to quote unquote deal with these folks who were handing out peer reviewed scientific literature that they wrote at a scientific conference, and they were forcibly removed and kicked out of the remainder of the conference. And this is, I cannot like this is huge. This is just. I mean, it's an enormous deal. This is not something that happens. The other thing that I will note is that Jay Bhattacharya, the head of the NIH and temporary head of the CDC, was slated to speak at this event, and last minute backed out. But his entire platform is freedom of speech that he built on, speaking out against the COVID restrictions. So it's quite ironic that they, were that the ADA was platforming this free speech person and then called the police on their own editor in chief. But I mean, it's appalling. It's absolutely appalling.
Right. So what we have as an example, another example,
Hmm.
um, of an organization whose interests are threatened by the President of the United States,
Yes.
who has a speaker coming from the administration and is terrified that standing up for themselves will embarrass the White House and
Hmm.
therefore put them in more trouble. This is the kind of pre-compliance
Yep.
that we've all been told is a path to autocracy.
Hmm.
And it's shameful, truly shameful that the organization did that, censored its own its own people on its own leadership team,
Its
really.
own leadership team. I
Right.
mean, it was violence against their own leadership team, and I think that this is such an incredible example, again, of a person who does have a position of privilege, leveraging that to call attention to what I'm sure they're seeing inside, right? So if the leadership was willing to call police and do something this public, I have no qualms that that's inside, these closed door rooms. They're capitulating at every corner they possibly can.
Right.
So it's just a really good example of how a seemingly small, I mean, harmless. It's a harmless thing that they were doing, talking about science at a science conference, um, can be a really incredible protest tool.
Well, and
It is
here's
a
the
really
wonderful thing
incredible.
about yesterday.
Yeah.
When when either the administration, which I know this is
Hmm.
happening in Chicago with ICE, but
Hmm.
or those who are afraid of this administration and want to curry favor, overplay their coercive tactics, um, it backfires
Yep.
because I don't know how many people are at this conference, 600, and I don't know how many people, maybe
Probably more
6,000,
than that. Yeah, the
whatever the
ADA
number,
is
let's call it
huge.
10,000. Even
Yeah.
and it wasn't 10,000, right?
Right.
And they probably handed out half as many of, before if nobody had interrupted them, maybe 5,000 copies of this would have been handed out and nobody would have known. Whereas today,
Right.
this is spreading like wildfire, and the whole country is going to know that a
Hmm.
scientific institution censored its own people, would not let something they published be passed around because they're afraid of this administration because they know science has been politicized. And that's
Yep.
what happens when you behave this way.
Well, and not to mention the Streisand effect on that actual editorial that now
Right.
has been downloaded like 10,000 times off the internet, which, maybe three or 400 people might have read otherwise.
Right.
I mean, I did some posts on Instagram about this, and collectively, it has over 500,000 views. And so that's just me on Instagram.
Yep.
Um,
Do you
so
happen to know
yeah,
that the name of the man who runs uh, uh, the Diabetes Association?
the CEO that did the calling of,
Yes.
I do, but not off the top of my head. Let me,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, all right. It's not, but I would just say it out loud. But look, whoever you are,
Oh, I got it. It is Mr. Henderson and Dr. Kalyani. Um,
yeah. I
yep.
mean, look, diabetes is a huge problem in America. And for the American Diabetes Association has been very helpful to millions of Americans. But you do not help America, uh, Chuck Henderson. You do
Mhm.
not help America when you decide that it's okay to be so afraid of your own government that you're willing to censor people, who tell the truth. Down this road leads, let's see, measles and polio and maybe more diabetes because they're going to change. They've already
And
changed the diet chart, which is not right for diabetes. So
well, and when you kick 16 million people off of Medicaid, I'm sure a few of those folks have diabetes, right?
yeah,
I mean,
and
and
10
I'm sure
million more
there.
losing private insurance, losing.
That's right. And I'm sure there are some folks in ICE custody right now who have diabetes. I mean, really, if diabetes is the thing, like, let's fight for every person with diabetes right now. And that this is not that at
This is
all.
not that. It is not
Mm-mm.
it's a shame.
Mhm.
Okay, let's talk about the gutting of science.
Yeah,
Shall we?
let's
Let's just
talk.
spend a little
Let's
bit of
let's
time on
dive
this.
in.
I mean, I have a list. I'd love to get like my top 10 includes like firing 100,000 federal employees who are working in science.
Yeah, no, that's a big one.
Yeah. Um,
We'll start there. All of our scientific expertise that is used to make sure that we don't have a screwworm outbreak in our cattle population
wait, we
to
do.
protect. Yeah, that's right, because they fired
Yeah.
that team from the USDA.
Wait, stop for 1 second. I'm not sure,
Yep.
but this is Chicago, and I know people listen all over the world, but the bulk of my listeners live in cities. Screwworm is not something with which everybody's familiar. Why don't you tell everybody why this is terrifying?
Yeah, so screwworm is a type of fly that its larva eats flesh, and it it devastates cattle populations, and the jump over to humans is like that's a pretty hard jump over.
Rare, but it
It's
happens.
rare, but it happens.
Mhm.
But if you think that your hamburger was expensive yesterday when you were sitting on your patio eating it, wait until a few weeks from now because they have identified screwworm cases in Texas. And like because of the life cycle of the flies, once you identify one case of screwworm, there are lots and lots of cases of screwworm we haven't identified yet. And it is devastating for cattle populations. It's devastating for farmers. I mean, it's a very big deal. It's something that the United States has not dealt with for, I think, decades
Well, say
because
that
we
differently. It's something the United States has prevented for decades.
prevented. Yeah, exactly. And
Right.
with teams of people who are experts in this one little worm.
Yep. And who are now fired.
Right.
Right. And so back it comes. All right. That's one of the um, most visible and most uh, timely news stories about what happens when you fire your scientific expertise.
Mhm.
Um, Next on my list are like, I don't know, 9,000 scientific grants that have been cut and that are NIH and NSF funded.
Yeah, and what's not been cut, the grants that are going out, the scientists aren't receiving the funding. And so there are the grants that have been just overtly cut, and then there are ones that they've been passed through, but they're not seeing the funding. They can't make the hires, they can't do the projects, and that far outweighs the number of grants that have actually been cut.
Mhm.
So across the board, though, I mean, in my own department, can think of 4 different labs that are dealing with this that didn't have their grants explicitly cut, although my own lab had
Yep.
grants cut, uh, that were not reinstated, but just not receiving funds.
Colette, I should have asked the beginning, and this is at
Of
Emory?
course. Yes, I'm at Emory. I've just finished my PhD a couple weeks ago, but still working with
Well,
my lab.
congratulations on that
Thank
part.
you, I
But
appreciate
so
that.
Emory's a great university, and so when grants are cut, for people who aren't in the scientific community, this means
Yeah,
that young scholars have no jobs. It means that a
yeah.
generation of scientific talent is going to go find something else to do.
Yeah, and it won't be in the sciences. So what this means is generally in the United States, the government will fund grants for 5 years at a time, and that time frame is really important because that's how long it takes to train a graduate student. And so you get a grant, you can bring on a graduate student who you then get to train as a PhD advisor, or maybe you bring on a few, and you're able to sort of craft and generate generational talent in your area and expand the field. And you know, like it's like less than the top 10% of grants get funded. It's very competitive. It's a government contract that people compete for. Only the best of the best get access to these funds. And I mean, it's devastating. It's devastating.
Well, it means scientific leadership in the world in the next generation will not be in the
It's
United
up for
States.
grabs. That's
Right.
right. It's
Right.
up for grabs.
Right.
I will say that I do think there is a future in which we act fast and we build fast after the Trump administration. However, that is going to require us to lay a lot of groundwork now. So I'm hopeful. However, the threat is huge, and as we're scaling back our scientific prowess, other countries like China are absolutely cranking it up, and we're just handing them the future.
And they are recruiting our best faculty. They're recruiting our best researchers. Um, I mean, talent is now, let me say it differently. From all my life, talent came to the United States. Scientific.
Yeah,
They came to
yeah.
study, they came to work. We
Mhm.
became a wealthy country because of them.
Yes.
Many of the biggest private companies in the world that grew here out of the scientific work in our labs will now that work is happening. Other people aren't coming here. They're looking for opportunities where they don't feel like they're one election away from being unemployed.
Yeah, and where they don't feel like they're gonna get, kicked out of their home scientific conference for passing out an editorial, right?
Right.
Um,
Which
and
might
not to
happen in
mention
China. I mean,
that yes,
yeah,
that's very true.
right. But for
Um,
God's sake, that's where we are.
right, America, in America.
Okay, so I mean, I'm just going to keep going down my list with you
Yeah, let's
because
do it.
like RFK, I mean, like after those
Oh,
initials, I could bring up like 12 things.
yeah.
So just
Um,
like, what has he done to science
he
other than ignore
has
it?
well, that's right. So there's one specific example with RFK Jr. that I think is the quintessential thing that he has done to science. He cleared without scientific review, without like any sort of review from people who are experts in this area, a completely unethical study on small, tiny babies in a small nation in West Africa called Guinea Bissau. After pulling all of our Gavi vaccine funding from this country, he then worked with a group in Denmark to do a study that would never be allowed in Denmark or the United States, where they did a random or they proposed a randomized control trial for a vaccine for 14,000 newborns for hepatitis B in a country where there are hospitals, there's no public health infrastructure, and over 25% of the population is hepatitis B positive. And so any child, any tiny new baby that would get a placebo of this vaccine would be exposed to hepatitis B, which develops into liver cancer. I mean, the death rate is huge. It's a horrible disease. Um, and the final piece of this is that this is a nation where we don't have a US embassy. They just experienced a political coup in November, and he was ready to fund with US dollars, 2 million US dollars there to effectively, I mean, death sentence these small children.
Well, let's talk about
And
that in a different way. Because by way of background for everybody, there's an enormous set of regulations developed over time for any scientific study that involves human beings
yes, the
and
Helsinki
committees.
Accords and the Belmont Review, those are the
Yes,
two.
and these are not just in the United States, this is all over the world in
Mhm.
order to protect humans from
Yes.
studies that might cause them terrible damage. And you need
Yes.
consent, and you need all kinds of ways to protect people from
Yes.
from the ill effects of being tested on. And that's because, let's
And
be
to be
honest,
experimented on.
yeah, to experiment. And to be honest, that's because we had terrible experiments on people. Think
Correct.
of
Tuskegee.
Tuskegee, exactly right.
Mhm.
So this is out of this terrible experience here, we develop ways to be better than that.
Yes.
And these terrible people want us to go back to that.
And they don't want us to go back to it in the United States. They're willing to offshore to some of the most vulnerable people in the world, some of the most vulnerable children in the world that don't have access to medical care. They don't have access to, governmental support or just doctors in general. And so we took their vaccines that we were supposed to be supplying to them and replaced it with an unethical study where half of the children would be exposed to hepatitis B. And it is deeply evil. I mean, it is wicked to experiment with children in that way. And that was cleared by RFK Jr. We at Stand Up for Science, we got the study stopped, which was just a huge win. I think it's the biggest win. I can't like it was
Well, you
just
say it
huge for us
was.
for our team. Yeah,
It's hard to
it was
it's hard
huge.
to compare other things to that. Yeah.
It really is. And that's what we're fighting. That's what we're up against. And this was cleared by political appointees without any weigh in from the experts at the CDC or in the United States scientific ecosystem.
Ugh.
Yeah, it's
It,
horrible.
it's horrible. It's horrible. Well, I mean, so when you look at the landscape, I mean, I don't think I want to keep just going down the list, the horror show
No,
list,
yeah, you're
right?
good.
But what do you see any retreat on the attack from this administration, or do you see a doubling down and at the same time an amping up of the resistance?
Yeah, so this is a great question. And I'm going to come at this answering this question from the perspective of being a clinical psychologist. In abusive relationships, often what you see is when the person in power is threatened, they become more controlling, more manipulative, and more violent. And that is the moment, like when women first leave a domestic abuse situation, that's the moment where you see the most like, harmful types of violence. And I think that we're starting to see that. Like, I think that that pull away where the Trump administration is really grasping at straws and trying to pull in and sort of rein in any resistance, any forces against them, and we're seeing that through increases in violent behavior effectively, right? So we're seeing that in at the ICE concentration camps, right? Like we're seeing that with the police force across the United States. We're seeing that with these really extra legal approaches to try to rein in what scientists can and cannot study. Like we're seeing this real crank up, but at the same time, we are seeing a crank up of resistance. And I think that there's just this power struggle happening right now. And it's important that we continue to fight. Like this is the moment. This is the critical inflection point where we can win. But we have to double down on our resistance.
Circling back to the beginning, it's why
Mhm.
the behavior of the leadership of the Diabetes Association is
Yes.
so it not just cowardly, but incredibly dangerous.
It is very dangerous. I think that that's the exact framing that needs to be said about this, that capitulation at this point is going to cost lives. And so, I mean, it's really black and white right now, and you got to pick a side. Like that we've arrived at that point in our story.
Oh, look, and if you haven't decided to pick a side, I mean, the
Well, that's
Secretary
right.
of Energy just said we're going to spend $700 million, funding coal plants,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And by the way, and they're paying companies not to do clean energy. So I don't know, you know, it's pretty easy to decide if you want to have a future or not.
That's right.
Um, I think I want to spend some time on the new, more dangerous rule than everything else that they're
Yes.
pushing. I mean, scientists are now, well, they want to have a rule. They don't have it yet, but they're going to get
Right.
it. That
Yeah.
says that scientists have to get pre-approval. Well, I mean, you talk about it.
Yeah, sure. So on May 29th, Russell Vogt, who is the mastermind behind Project 2025, who's now in the cabinet, overseeing the
20.
Office of, yeah, overseeing the Office of Management Budget,
Yeah.
OMB, which is basically the like landing and dispersing place of all federal tax dollars
Yeah.
in the government. And so generally speaking, there are like there's a way to get through rules and regulations that don't require congressional sign off because not everything needs to be voted on in the House and the Senate. But he is using this to pass something that would be huge legislation if he were doing it appropriately. And what this would do, it's a 412-page document. It is really, really intensive. It would require that every single grant that is funded by the US government has to be approved by political appointees, and it has to be in line with the administration's priorities and policies. Any grant can be canceled at any time for any reason. There is a broad prohibition on international scientific collaboration. So we wouldn't be allowed to work with anybody in China or Iran, but we also wouldn't be allowed to work with anybody that works with those folks. So that's everybody else in the world. It would mean that applicants of grants can be denied receiving that grant money based on their individual like affiliations with various organizations. So if the Trump administration decides that Indivisible, for example, is anti-American, you can have your grant canceled or you know just not given because
Mhm,
you are
mhm.
associated there. The other two things is it anything that is deemed quote unquote woke by the administration, we can't speak on.
So this is being pitched as politicization of science entirely.
Yes,
I
yes,
see a different piece of this, and I want to ask you about it.
yeah,
That's a lot of money that we have
it's
still in our,
brilliance.
right? Billions.
Hmm.
When billions can be handed out by a political appointment without going through any other, for any reason, and they can be canceled for any reason, you've just
Yep.
created a billions and billions of dollars slush fund for
That's
politics,
exactly right. That's
right?
exactly
So it
right.
is,
Yep.
so it is not just that they disagree with the science or they think, maybe we shouldn't spend money on gender study work. It is that they want to control billions of dollars of political slush fund money. It is
Yep.
absolutely corrupt, to the
It's
core
totally corrupt.
corrupt.
Yep. And one of the reasons why I brought up the Guinea-Bissau study is because that is about to happen at the
Everywhere.
scale of billions of dollars, right? Where there are I mean, it's what they're going to do. They're going to take this money and they're going to use it for their own purposes. We've already started to see some of this too, where funds from NASA science are being funneled to SpaceX, are being funneled to Blue Origin, right? So we're already starting to see patterns of this where they've tested it out in different places. And I mean, if this goes through, that's what they're going to do.
Yeah. And look, everybody listening, there's an easy way to actually comment on proposed federal regulation. You
Yes.
want to tell people how to do that? Because it's kind of, and
Yeah.
if you send me it, I'll post a link for people to
Yeah.
use. It's very easy for anyone to make comments on, and it turns out they matter a little bit.
They do. So there are sort of two directions you can go with making a comment. If you're an expert, you should get in there, get in on the weeds, post your like policy recommendations. If you're not an expert, that's totally okay because we just need outrage about this. So the noise and saying, I don't want anybody controlling my cancer research except for the scientists who are experts in this area, like that's plenty. And we need both outrage and we need legal groundwork to sort of move forward. So we have, it's the Stand Up for Science Action Center. I've sent you the link so you can share it with your listeners.
Do that.
And we have a guide on first of all, we have a guide on what is included in the proposed rule. We have a guide on how to comment. And we also have a easy one-stop shop portal where you can submit your comment. We'll register it on our end. So we'll have a timestamp to make sure that it gets into the regulations.gov. They're doing some shenanigans, and we just want to be prepared. We're checking to make sure that those are making it onto the Federal Register.
Yeah. Okay. And just know that the moment they do this, there'll be litigation. That
Yes.
litigation will cite the Supreme Court's favorite new idea, the major questions doctrine, and say this
Hmm.
is not the kind of thing that a executive branch gets to do, but Congress gets to do.
That's right.
You never know what the Supreme Court will do, and they don't deserve the benefit of the doubt.
Yep.
So lean in hard and understand that this is just a slush fund that will make the $2 billion he took in his corrupt deal with Todd Blanche look like nothing, like
That's
nothing.
right. Yes. And our understanding based on legal review of this is that this is also outside of science. So it's any types of grants, which means that it
It's
falls
the
into the
arts, it's the
trillions.
humanities,
It's
it's
Medicare.
CDBG to cities. It's
Yes, it's Medicare, it's veteran benefits.
yeah,
So this is a lot of money. But yeah, we are getting our legal ducks in a row. We're prepared to fight on this. I'm actually headed to DC tomorrow, and I'll be in DC all week. We've got meetings. I mean, they got me back to back. I'm going to be yelling at Congress all week next week about this, and we're really pushing to try to move the needle to get this stopped. Really, the rule needs to be revoked. Not a single line in those 412 pages should be passed through,
yep,
period.
yep, yep. I have a scientist congressman here, Sean Casten, who will be an ally.
No, wonderful. We'll have to reach out to his office.
Yep,
I didn't see him on my schedule for this
yep,
week.
yep, yep. He'll be an ally. All right. So let me talk about one other kind of attack
Sure.
on this. This week, the president finally signed off on something that he tried to do at the end of his first
Mm,
administration, the creation of Schedule F.
yes, Schedule F. It's bad. So Schedule F reclassifies federal employees and essentially removes protections that allow federal employees who are in positions of power, such that they're communicating, pros and cons about policy, these kinds of things. it removes their protections. And so it's essentially a sort of anti-whistleblower, anti-First Amendment type of approach. It means that so the very, 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 very conservative estimate of the number of people for whom they're having these protections removed is 5 to 8,000. Our estimate is closer to 50,000 federal
Yeah.
employees.
Yep.
It's bad. It's really,
Right. So
really
this is
bad.
again about reversing something that's been in place since Martin Van Buren was president, the creation of the most remarkable civil service on the planet. People who go into
Yes,
government, who go
they're
into government,
incredible.
learn the work and do the work, and instead it is going to be a patronage cesspool, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
your Uncle MAGA, who was at January 6th and got pardoned, will be able to be hired over somebody who has worked for the job forever. That's again the corrupt bargain that these terrible people are trying to foist on America.
The other piece of this too is that anybody who's currently in public service that is now having these protections removed. So these are the people who say, "Hey, if you put that power plant there, you're going to poison the water in this community." At the EPA, right?
Right.
Those people can now be fired for saying that.
No, those people will be fired.
They will be fired. They will be
They
fired.
will be fired. They'll be
But
fired
this
before they have
is
the chance to say it.
That's right.
Because
It's
somebody from the industry who wants the plant there wants the job.
That's right. They want to be able to pass it through.
Yep.
So we're expecting pretty significant firings on this. We're also expecting a lot of legal
Yep.
action in this area, and we're also getting our ducks in a row for this
Right. And
too.
once again, this has happened before with firing earlier in this administration, and a
Hmm.
judge will say you have to stop it, and a judge might order people rehired, but it is too late. The speed with which the judiciary moves is different than the speed an executive branch can move. And so that massive damage gets done illegally by these felons who are in charge of our country.
That's right.
Yeah. Um, Colette, you focused on science, but
Hmm.
others have focused on voting rights, abortion rights,
Yeah,
LGBTQ rights, or just peace,
that's right.
right? Or maybe there are people who focused on, wait a minute, why do we have an import tax on everything? How
Hmm.
is your movement um, aligning with allies in this moment to create a bigger push to change America?
Yeah, I mean, our whole tagline is mobilizing the fight for science and democracy. And that and democracy is really, really important because we view science as a critical pillar of democracy. You have to have an independent place where you can ask questions about the world around us and then use that information to inform policy and to inform who gets to participate in democracy. So it's fun because there are a lot of places where there's a lot of overlap between what we cover and what other people cover, like reproductive rights or
Mhm.
LGBTQ plus rights. So we love partnering with folks. We did a whole bunch of partnering several months ago with the disabled community
Yep.
and hosting virtual and accessible rallies around No King's Day, those sorts of
Mhm.
things. But we love partnering where we can get that crossover. And if we can't get the crossover, my goodness, we're cheering people on. And anything we can do to hop in coalition, we are willing to do.
So upcoming, there's going to be a big day, the day that Donald Trump has
Yes.
his cage match, and the rest of the country has a different celebration.
Hmm.
Um, are you guys going to be out?
We are encouraging our membership across the country
Yep.
to get out in the
Great.
streets. We love making sure that folks have science signage
Science
for these types
signs.
of events. Yeah, science signs. We always encourage our folks to get creative. Put on a frog suit if you study frogs. Like lean into it, have some fun. There's a lot of joy and resistance. And we're also actively pushing on this OMB piece too, and so I imagine we'll probably try to get some direct action going just as we move further down the line of levers to pull on this.
That's fabulous. That's
Hmm.
absolutely fabulous. I'm in awe of the work, and I'm just to go back to where I was at the beginning.
Yeah.
Those of you we've been talking for I don't know 40 some minutes in detail about the attack on free thought, and scientific thought is a form of free thought
Yeah.
in our country. Um, And we're talking with Colette, who, was like hundreds of thousands of people trying to get a PhD, um, in a field she loves, doing work
Mhm,
she loves,
mhm.
stymied by a government that wants to censor that kind of work, and didn't just sit down. She stood up and did something remarkable that is inspiring and that all of us um, can learn from.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, and I just want to highlight too that like I came to this with no activism background. I'd been to one protest before our protest, and
Yeah, but you're wearing a Star
I
Wars shirt, you
this
know?
is my husband's. This is
Yeah.
not my shirt. I have not seen all the Star Wars movies. I know that that's like sacrilege in the area I am in. The dorks are going to be real mad about that. I'm going to get some emails, I think. But I say all of that to make the point that like I'm not special. I'm a mom. I'm a scientist who just wanted to study addiction science. I just wanted to make some treatments in this area that could help some people. And I wanted to raise my son in a country that would love him the way that like like I wanted him to be proud of where he was and to have the same freedoms that I've had to pursue my dreams. And so I don't like I will say I think motherhood radicalized me. I regularly tell people that I don't think I ever would have done this if I didn't have a child. There's just something about looking down at your kiddo
I
and
have
being
three.
like,
They're
"Oh god.
grown, and yes, it
Yeah, like
does. Yeah.
we gotta do something here, guys. Like we can't let this happen." So the only thing that I will say that is quote unquote special about me is that I'm a mom, and that was just a huge motivating factor. So yeah, I'm not special. I don't come to this with some special knowledge. It's just speaking out and pulling people together as best as we can to meet the moment.
All right, everybody. It's the anniversary of D-Day. You're
Mhm.
listening to somebody who says she's not special. It's not true. But she says she's not special, just like those guys who stormed that beach weren't special. In fact, they were brave, stood up, and made the world a better place. Colette, thank you.
Thank you, Edwin. I really appreciated this conversation. Thanks
I
for
look
having me
forward to
on.
talking again sometime.